All right, so I think that we're about ready to get started here with this meeting. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. I am Representative Jeff Stenquist, chairing the committee, and hope everyone received an agenda that we'll go through. Yes, we do, and that's the first thing on the agenda. So let's move to that. Who's administering the oath of office?
Tiffany is me.
From our legal person?
I'm just a notary public.
Okay, notary. Okay, somebody official that's doing it.
Yep.
Yeah, the notary. Yes.
And if you would like to read off of this, it's basically. Are you Jonathan?
Yep. Don't you
So
stand
do I
up?
just go to, is this, or is it everyone, or And just no, him? it's he.
There's two.
He
Yeah.
and Jason.
Sorry.
Well, we can,
Kinda just
do you want to go?
I'll-
Yeah,
do you want me to go
grab
get
it
it?
do, can we do that?
What's that?
I just need to see his ID.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah.
Do you want me to stay or go?
Well, let's move over here to Jason.
Okay.
You can, if you want to go run and get that, and then come back while we do. And so maybe what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Director Ferry first, and then do the oath. After. Okay. Well, let's do the oath first, then, for Jason. And yeah, if you want to use the mic there.
You bet.
I guess I say it first. I, Jason Curry, having been elected or appointed to the Office of Outdoor Adventure Commission, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Utah, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
I, Jason Curry, having been elected or appointed to the Office of Outdoor Adventure Commission, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity.
Bring up the pen over here, sorry.
Congratulations and welcome. Director Ferry is blessing us with his presence today, but he's here to introduce Director Curry.
That's right. Thank you, Representative Stenquist. And it is an honor and privilege to be with you today. And I just wanted to take just a quick minute. This is going off script, off the agenda, but just to introduce you all to Jason Curry, our new director of the Division of Outdoor Recreation. Jason brings with him a wealth of knowledge and experience and a passion for all things outdoor recreation. He's going to be a great asset to both this commission, but also just to the division itself and to the Department of Natural Resources. And I can tell you that we had, this was, so I've been in this position now for about 6 months, and this really was the most difficult decision I've had to make so far because we had an incredible group of candidates. This is the most popular job in the state of Utah. And I mean, who wouldn't want to be over outdoor recreation? It's an incredible opportunity. And I just wanted to kind of set the stage. You know, we look at the last few years and the advancements that we've made as a state in outdoor recreation, all things outdoor recreation, and it truly sets us apart. And it creates a unique environment where we can excel. We have wonderful amenities, incredible natural resources, parks, national parks, trails, recreational opportunities, and it's a real benefit to the people of Utah to have an Outdoor Adventure Commission, to have a division of outdoor rec that is engaged and involved. I'm actively working on, you know, one of the biggest challenges that we're facing as a state is this drought and some of the water concerns. And so working to engage with the state of Israel because they're leaders in water conservation. And they told me just last week, they told me the director of the consulate told me, he said, I'm only going to work with you guys. We'll send you our water experts. You have to send us your outdoor recreation experts. I said, deal. So working together collaboratively, but it really shows how much this organization is respected on a world stage and how incredible this opportunity is. So welcome, Jason. Looking forward to working with you, with all of you, and congratulations. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, and welcome, Jason and Jonathan. I knew that. To the commission as well. Excited to have you here and to be working with you both in this capacity. Okay, so I guess we will move on to our next item on the agenda, which is notification of OHV Recreation Grant Administration Rule and Zion Restricted Account Rule changes. Is that Chase? Are you going to handle this, or Tara? The rule changes for the OHV Rec Grant?
Yes. Here, just a second. There are just some very basic changes.
Do you want to turn your mic on there? Yeah.
I'm going to bring up my, it's on right now. So there's some very basic changes on the Zion Park restricted account, but it's very straightforward, I would say. Here, just a minute. I'm going to bring this up. Sorry, Shane, I've been working on, but it's not there.
Do you want me to talk about
Yeah, go ahead. And I will, oh, here, the rule change right there, that one? This one. Oh, that one. Yeah, that's the rule, and updates references to sections, various sections in the Utah Code, references to the restricted account at issue. It's the, by the way, it was originally spelled Zion's National Park. Thank you for picking that up. It's Zion National Park Support Programs Restricted Account, not the Zion National Park restricted account, and eliminates a section that indicates that the division decides who can obtain a special license plate. We don't have anything to do with that. The Motor Vehicle Act leaves that decision to the DMV, and then just clarifies some other things in the coding, and that the application shall be made to the Division of Outdoor Recreation on a form acceptable. And on the OHV grant program rule, there's quite a few changes, but the new rule is necessary now because the program is now run by the Division of Outdoor Recreation as opposed to parks, and changes to the OHV grant program statute during last year's session increased the possible uses of grant monies that brought about the necessary changes as opposed to simply changing the old rule. And it's got more detail on the application processes, how those applications will be evaluated, and the requirements of grantees, for example, and reimbursement of and closeout replacements. Some of that had to do with input after we had an internal audit. So it's just cleaned it up a bit, and it still has to go to the division director. There's no voting on it. It is merely informing. But are there any questions on it?
Go ahead, Jason.
Terry, you mentioned division director. I think you meant department DNR director, Jill Ferry.
Yes, I do.
Okay, just.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, okay. The department director, not the division director.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that we didn't have on this agenda at the beginning was any public comment. And I don't know if we have any members of the public that would like to speak on any items in general. If there's anyone from the public that is online that would like to speak, perhaps you could raise your hand or put something in the chat so that we could recognize you. If it's on a general, if it's just a comment in general, then we could take that at this time. Or if you want to speak to a specific item, we could wait until we get to that item and then give you an opportunity to speak on that one. I think that might be a little bit more relevant. So anyone from any member of the public that would like to speak on something general or on this item number 3, the OHV Recreation and Zion restricted account rule changes. All right, I'm not seeing any indication that there is anyone to give public comment. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the next item. Item number 4, Outdoor Recreation Caucus update. You're hearing it here first. And I just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a preview to this group so that you could be thinking about it, or we could start spreading the word. There will be general announcements made probably in a couple of weeks. However, Senator Anderegg and I have been working with a couple of industry organizations to create a legislative recreation and tourism caucus within the legislature. We have an organizing committee, and we have had a couple of meetings. We are working with the outdoor recreation, a couple outdoor recreation and tourism industry groups that are going to be helping us from a sponsorship standpoint. The idea is to have a couple of meetings during the legislative session. We would like to open it up, when we have those meetings, and it might coincide with Recreation Day on the Hill or Tourism Day on the Hill or both, that we would kind of just invite people to come and participate and provide input on various subjects. We'll have agendas, but then in addition, outside of the legislative session, the idea is to hold perhaps 2 or 3 recreation excursions that we do, maybe, an OHV day down in Emery County, or canyoneering around the Kanab area, or something like that, in which we would invite, various people, maybe some user groups, but also members of the legislature, to get out in the field and see firsthand some of the issues that we encounter in recreation in certain areas around the state. So that's the idea around it. We have similar caucuses within the legislature, like the Clean Air Caucus or the Hunting and Fishing Caucus, things like that. And we thought it would be really important for us to have something more oriented toward just recreation in general and tourism. So more information on that to come, but you're kind of hearing it here first. Okay. Any questions about that? Comments? Vicky's got her thumbs up. She likes it. So, okay. Next item, item number 5, 2023 General Legislative Session Preview of Bills. So I guess this is me talking about a couple of bills. I know I'm carrying a few. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag on any other legislators' bills, but I don't actually have a lot of inside information about bills that other legislators are running. I know about a few that are probably not terribly controversial and probably wouldn't be an issue. But a couple of things that I can tell you that I am personally working on, several bills that really have come out of discussions that we've had here at this commission, and it's been really helpful to have some of those ideas percolate up, and hopefully we can put those into legislation in the upcoming session. The first one that I'll talk about is stemming from what we did last year in the legislature, where we created the recreation, I think it's actually called the Outdoor Adventure Restricted Account, Outdoor Restricted Account, which takes a percentage of sales tax revenue and dedicates it toward outdoor recreation. So in the last session, when that was created, it was sort of the idea was, let's get it created. Let's create this carve out and this funding source, but we didn't specify how that money would be spent, how it would be prioritized, who would look at it, and so forth. So I have a bill that I'm putting together that would follow up on that and specify how that money would be spent and what the process and prioritization around that would be. Right now, it's just a skeleton. I don't necessarily want to get into the details right now because it could certainly change, and there will be discussions and lots of public hearings during the legislative session. But certainly, a portion of it would be going towards state parks, other portions that would go toward grant programs, and as well as some discretionary project funding. And one of the thoughts that I have is that perhaps this commission could provide some of the prioritization for that portion of the fund to forward to the legislature our recommended prioritization list. So that's the general outline of the bill that would, kind of put a little bit more structure around that restricted account. That's something that I think I've mentioned here before, is that one of my concerns is that we don't want it to just be a free-for-all. Here's a bucket of money, and then everybody's going to go try to grab a piece of that, but rather have some structure and organization around how that money would be apportioned out, and something that could set a precedent going forward. So that's one of the bills. And if anybody has any questions, please, raise your hand, or if anybody online, feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions or comments as I go through some of these. So that's one piece of legislation that's going forward. Another piece of legislation, and actually some of these may be combined if they're in the same part of the code. So I don't know if it's going to be separate bills or if it might be one bill that covers several of these topics. But another one would make a few changes to the makeup of this commission, because originally when this commission was formed, it was still either, the division was either part of the Governor's Office of Economic Development at the time, or it was split in half. And so now that everything's been fully moved over under DNR, there's, I think, just as a matter of necessity, because of that change, we need to make a few changes to the designations and the makeup of the commission, as well as, for example, I do intend to probably add a position for state parks here. I think that makes sense. So just a heads up that there might be a little shuffling of the deck in terms of the makeup of the commission as well. The next item that I'll mention stemmed from some conversations that we started. Actually, I think it started at our Cache Valley workshop that we were having when we were talking with representatives from the Forest Service. The idea of creating some sort of shared stewardship. I mean, we talked about this. I mean, you talked about this with one of your recommendations, Dr. Smith, in one of our past meetings as deficiencies, is creating shared stewardship or co-managed, co-funded areas. And so I'm working on some legislation, and I've had a couple meetings with Forest Service people, BLM people, on what that would look like in terms of creating a framework where we could create shared stewardship agreements around recreation. We currently have shared stewardship agreements, as I understand it, when it comes to wildfire management, and I know that there are some interlocal agreements, as well as I think what I've been looking at is modeling this legislation after the Watershed Restoration Initiative bill that went through. And the feedback that I'm getting is that those shared stewardships and that WRI program are working really well. And so I'm hoping to use some of those same concepts and apply it to recreation. So yes, Kate.
I'm interested in this idea. I think it was one that's been brought up in a couple of the different stakeholder meetings, and is definitely worth exploring and figuring out what legislative solutions might work. I wanted to just put on your radar, given the group I represent, to not forget cities. It seems to me that when you look at those other examples, it's often maybe a county and the Forest Service, or state and the county and the Forest Service. But for recreation assets, I wouldn't forget to include that cities might be part of those agreements and to talk with them. Because just by way of example, in Bountiful, we're doing those types of agreements right now with the Forest Service for the trail expansion we're doing that kind of just directly city to feds versus any of those other parties being a player.
Thank you very much. That's absolutely a great comment and something that we should keep in mind. I think one of the things that for me has been an eye opener, and that as I've learned, particularly through all of the different workshops that we were holding and the discussions that we've had as a commission, is the importance and the challenge of coordinating between all these different layers of government, because it seems obvious, especially given the fact that so much of our land in the state of Utah is under the control of federal agencies, whether it's BLM or Forest Service or whoever that might be, as well as it could be SITLA land, it could be private land, and the coordination and positive collaboration between different layers of government is incredibly important in this space. That's something that it's really been driven home with me. And so having these types of, some sort of a framework or facilitating these types of agreements, whether it's between counties and BLM or cities and Forest Service, especially when we have cities that literally abut not just Forest Service land, but wilderness areas, and I mean we really have that interface in several cases. So that's one of the pieces of legislation that I'm excited to run, and I mean really a lot of these things that came directly out of the discussions and the things that we've learned on this commission this past year.
Can I comment on
Yes,
that one real
please
quick?
do,
Just
Jason.
first of all, echo Kate's sentiment on making sure that cities are involved. And I do have a little bit of insight on the wildfire shared stewardship agreements.
Yeah.
And I think, number one, the way those agreements are set up are very specific. They're for protecting communities and protecting watersheds. So I think the language that we use to set something like this up would definitely want to include communities, and even as specific as cities and towns and counties. But the other thing too, I think it might be worthwhile just to carefully look at how we name this. Shared stewardship generally, I mean, it's a Forest Service initiative. Many states have shared stewardship with regard to wildfire mitigation. So it might be worth looking at how we might differentiate ourselves so that we don't get confused with or diluted by shared stewardship. And it's been really successful. They've gotten quite a bit of funding. And if somebody sees that shared stewardship is funded on one page, it might be good to have us differentiated at least by title.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I think a lot of people understand the terminology shared stewardship.
Correct.
But I liked in the presentation that Dr. Smith did for us that you used the term co-managed. That might be something that we co-managed or co-funded or something like that.
Right. Yeah, we call it shared stewardship little s and shared stewardship big S, meaning the program versus the what we've been doing for a long time in a lot of different partnerships between local and federal government agencies. But yeah, shared recreation stewardship or something like that. But,
yeah, great, thank you. And certainly in all of this legislation, I would love input and feedback from all of the expertise that we have on this commission and from broader parties, certainly as we go through an open public process during the legislative session. The next item that I'll mention is again, stem from a conversation I think that we had in our vernal workshop, where we were talking about the proliferation of and the increased usage that we're seeing with RV usage versus primitive camping, and the fact that we may be a little bit short on or have a need for expansion of RV hookups. So I have a piece of legislation that would create a small registration fee, a small additional fee with, and it might be an additional fee or it might be a carve out of the existing fee for RVs that would go toward specifically creating or expanding RV hookups. Probably initially in, public facilities, not necessarily private facilities. That's kind of where my head's at right now, which could include, public campgrounds or state parks or things like that. So that's just an idea that came up. So I've got a bill that's being drafted on that. I believe that there is something similar in the boating arena that's being sponsored by Representative Snyder, is what I heard. Not to let the cat out of the bag, but I think that's, yeah, something similar along those lines, which is kind of similar to what we've got for OHV, but we're saying, hey, let's, especially when there's an opportunity, when there's a registration fee that's already being paid, let's maybe piggyback on that to create a dedicated source of funding. And that hopefully, one, can benefit the people that are paying that fee directly and accelerate the expansion of those, RV hookups or boat ramps or whatever that's used for, but also then take free up a little bit of the general, like the recreation restricted account, to go toward other things and not have to have competing priorities with funding there. I think that's the main list that I have that's recreation oriented from a legislative standpoint. Is there anything that I'm missing? And there may be other legislators that are running things that I just don't even know about.
Yeah, there are a few.
Are there?
Representative Albrecht's got a couple. Representative Snyder, as you mentioned. I think Representative Stratton. There are a few. We know a few details on a few of them, but probably.
Representative Owen.
And yeah, Doug Owens has also a bill. So, but I think we'll probably wait until text becomes public to really talk about many of the details on those.
Yeah, I don't want to steal thunder away from people and let them roll things out as they think it's best. But yeah, so we'll keep our eyes peeled. I know that everyone will be watching to see what comes out, and I appreciate it. I've had a few legislators come to me and feel like, out of courtesy, they've given me a heads up that there's something recreation related that they're working on, and I've appreciated that as well.
I think there's a list of about 25 bills that
Okay.
I've got that mention recreation in some way or some connection with outdoor rec. So.
Well, I'm glad to see that there's a lot of interest. That's good.
I was going to say, one of them by Representative Stratton is now numbered HB 32, dealing with what looks like Provo Canyon.
Provo Canyon, yeah. I expected that he would have one around Provo Canyon.
Yeah, they dumped a handful of bills last night. There was only 4 numbered, and now there's several more.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Any other items to bring up on that one? Things that we should mention? Sounds like there's more to say there. It feels like it's just right around the corner. I mean, it's like it's looming over our heads right now. Okay. We'll move on to item number 6 and turn it over to Director Curry to talk about the governor's budget and Division of Outdoor Rec legislative priorities.
All right, and I don't know if Paul is on and can get the presentation that I have on the screen. No response. Well, let me bring my computer up so at least I have my talking points.
Patrick, do you have that?
I sent it to Paul. You want me to send it to you, Patrick? I can do that real quick. Okay. There you go, Patrick. It should be in your inbox. All right, great. So as you know, Governor Caucus released his budget recommendations, I think a little over a week ago. And we're fortunate enough to have some recommendations for the Division of Outdoor Recreation. So I thought I would just go through and briefly hit on what those are. Next slide. So there are 3 of them. Number 1 is our Outdoor Recreation Education Specialist. We've got our Utah Children's Outdoor Recreation and Education Grant, and then a regional trail crew. And next slide. Important thing to keep in mind is that all of these funds are already appropriated. They're restricted accounts. It's not general fund. So basically, what we're doing is just asking the legislature's permission to use those funds that are in our accounts. And so as you can see here, it's kind of a quick breakdown, and we'll go into them as I go through each one. But there's a variety of those restricted account sources that these are coming out of. So next slide. So this is the first one, the education specialist. Now going back several years, there was in the Division of Parks and Recreation an education specialist, and they were responsible for both boating and OHV and just general outdoor safety. That position was eliminated in some of the lean years, and so now you can see right here we're looking for $50,000 from the OHV restricted account and $50,000 from the boating restricted account. Next slide. Here are a few of the whys. There's just been a huge increase in usage, especially in OHV. It's increased every year. Last year it's a 3.5% increase. There's just a lot more people using OHVs, and I think our reservoirs are busier than ever, especially with drought conditions making some of those spaces a little more crowded. So with that, we've got a lot of things happening safety-wise. I think anecdotally, anyway, we've been able to see there have been some really tragic situations with, especially with young people. So for us to be able to educate and inform people and keep the public safe, that's something that we feel like we're kind of lacking at this point. We want to be able to achieve some efficiencies with our safety courses, not just the new HB 180 safety course for all adult OHV operators, but even the youth safety courses, and it would enable us also to do that in-house and not have to spend a lot more money. I mean, we've got a lot of really good vendors that provide some good services for us and some good products, but I think in this particular case, some of our education is going to be really efficient if we can do that in-house. Next slide. A little bit more on it. I won't go through every single one of these bullets, but this material will be obviously available for you to review. But hands-on OHV training, going back in time, it used to be that in order to have a youth operator certificate, you had to go through a hands-on operator course, and that went away in favor of a strictly online version. And again, I think we've seen some crashes and other outcomes that probably indicate that might have been a good idea to keep that. Not only that, but there's a lot of agencies, state agencies, federal agencies, and even some nonprofits who, with their insurance needs or their rules and regulations require some hands-on operator instruction. So we want to be able to bring that back and have hands-on education. But this would also support the Every Kid Outdoors initiative, encouraging youth to get outside. I think we all in this room know the importance of outdoors in the education space. Supporting rural communities, providing them with more OHV safety. There's been a lot of requests. Next slide. So the next one is the Utah Children's Outdoor Recreation and Education Grant, UCOR. It's, again, trying to bring back, because we had this in 2019. Let's go to the next slide. In 2019, I think it was $100,000, is that correct, that we had? And with that $100,000, we actually had more than $600,000 in requests from around the state. So it does support our statutory responsibility to promote the health and social benefits of outdoor recreation, especially to young people. There are a few bullets there linking to some research. Again, these are things I think everybody in this room knows, especially in a rural setting. Recreation and access to recreation and education about the outdoors is good for mental health. And then a lot of evidence that says environmental stewardship is better adopted when people have hands-on education experience. So next slide. This is just a fact sheet from the 2019 grant, and again, that was just $100,000. What we're asking for for this year is $200,000, and that would come out of the outdoor recreation infrastructure account that Representative Stenquist referred to. Next slide. So again, the past grant funding taught children the skills that they need for outdoor recreation, gave them some hands-on opportunities. Learning science concepts in an outdoor setting is I think, the very best way. I think we can probably all reflect back to our experiences in the education world and remember, I do anyway, some of the most meaningful science things that I learned happened in an outdoor setting. There's some gear that can be provided through this program, as well as scholarships to cover the cost for low-income families to participate in some of these outdoor and nature-based learning opportunities. Okay, next slide. This is the regional trail crew request, and this is the largest one. It's a combination of two sources to fulfill a $1.3 million request. $400,000 of it is coming from our off-highway vehicle account, and then $900,000 is again coming from the Outdoor Adventure Infrastructure restricted account. And so there's a huge backlog of trail maintenance throughout the state, and there are just even some preliminary estimates is tens of millions. I think just the Forest Service alone, one of the early estimates we had is about 49 million in trail maintenance backlog. So with the thousands of miles of trails that we have, both motorized and non, this is going to help eliminate that backlog and make trails more enjoyable and really safer. So the goal is to establish, right, next slide, a long-term maintenance source or solution. A lot more manpower long-term, and it would be a bit of a train-the-trainer program for trail work for volunteer organizations and locals. We want local communities to be self-reliant, and but overall, I'll go to the next slide here and just go through some of the numbers at the bottom. You can see right now we're looking at 5 full-time employees as well as about 24 seasonal employees. And then, so that's almost $1 million there, plus vehicles, equipment, supplies of about $275,000. Right now, we do have a trails crew that works really well. They've been able to complete 15 projects per year. At least that's the pace that we've seen so far. So we feel like with an additional 4 crews, we'd be able to really take a bite out of that maintenance backlog. And a lot of this really does kind of boil down to public safety. There's some trails that are just outright dangerous because of the lack of maintenance. There's a lack of signage. The other good thing about this trail crew is we'll be able to accomplish another objective with them. Is some of them, the year-round employees, will be able to operate our snowmobile trail groomers, and again, that's another huge public safety need. With right now, we're kind of lacking in some of those operators, and this will fill that need really well. So that concludes it. Again, if you have any questions about this, please shoot them now. We'll ask for your support and ask for you to make these known among your networks. And again, emphasizing that this is not newly appropriated money. These are all from our restricted accounts. We're just asking the legislature for their authorization for us to use them in these ways.
Great, thank you so much. And I'm excited about the Trail Crew program. I think that having seen how that's worked in my own city, and I can imagine how that could be a huge benefit, and I know that you can multiply, you have a few experts, those efforts are actually multiplied by all the volunteers. It seems like you can get lots and lots of volunteers to show up. Obviously in different communities are going to be a little bit different in terms of the population, but I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's going to be, I think that's a really revolutionary idea to have something like that in place. Yeah, Kate.
I have a question. There's been some areas of the code, other areas where you're dealing with volunteers or youth groups, where sometimes we can't include them in volunteer workforces or give them protections we would give volunteers because they're minors. I just ran into this with work comp coverage for kids that are in the high school trades programs that are building houses. We have, in particular, the mountain bike youth groups that are required to give service in order to ride and participate. And they're a tremendous workforce when you can direct them with appropriate leadership to work on a project. And while we explore things, that might be something to explore if we need to think about legislative changes that would allow them to be, youth to be part of volunteer crews, and how you would change any structures to make sure that we can fully put to work anyone who wants to do trail projects of, whether they're mountain bike teams or cross-country teams or OHV youth that want to work on these projects.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I would hope that since those youth are already putting in thousands of hours of trail work, hopefully we don't run into some snag with that. But if there's something legislative that we would need to do to facilitate that, certainly it's a great idea to make sure that that could continue, because it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of removing any of those barriers.
Yeah, for sure.
And to be clear, I haven't necessarily run across any of that in the high school teams in my area that we work with, but because I just ran across it with high school kids building houses for Habitat for Humanity, it feels like we probably had what probably seemed like really good restrictions on youth and working and safety and all kinds of things, but maybe they don't make sense in this capacity if we're looking to educate youth, hopefully turn them into natural stewards of our outdoor areas and take advantage of their young, strong backs.
Yeah, and I don't know, maybe there's different insurance requirements when you're building a house versus when you're...
Giving them a nail gun versus a shovel is probably slightly different.
Maybe,
but just in case, it was on my mind looking at the different requests that we think about it through that lens, just because it was a weird one, and you can't fix it until the once a year when the legislature's back, once you find it.
Okay. All right. So does that conclude your presentation? Okay, thank you so much. All right, we will move on to item number 7, UDOT Trail Initiative. Okay, Ben. Great. All right, go ahead.
You all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Ben Hewitt with UDOT, the Program Development Director with UDOT. I'm on behalf of Terry Newell, the Deputy Director. She wasn't able to make it today, so she asked me to just give a brief description of the Utah Trail Network Initiative that was, I think, was initially announced by Governor Caucus and UDOT Executive Director Carlos Braceras at the end of October. And the basic vision, and I did drop a fact sheet in the chat, so I don't know if someone is able to bring that up, but I'll do my best to just describe the overall vision. And it was to build and maintain a network of trails with state transportation funding that can connect Utahns of all ages and abilities to their destinations and communities throughout the state. This would be building upon efforts that have already happened with trails of this type from local entities and such. The goal is that the trail network would provide additional transportation choices for Utahns, for those that either can't or choose not to drive a vehicle to get around, make them safe and accessible, and to help improve the quality of life for Utahns. So the governor's budget recommendation that was released on December 9th includes establishing an active transportation investment fund with an initial one-time contribution of $55 million, and then ongoing to transfer 5% of the transportation investment fund into that fund, which that's approximately $45 million in fiscal year 24. So the flyer that I shared is the initial thoughts, but obviously there's a lot of steps that need to happen through the legislative session if this were to get approved, and how it would look. I think some of the first orders of business, if it were to be approved, would be to do a lot of collaboration and gather all the different local active transportation plans and the long range planning activities, and use that as a basis to shape how this looks. So I don't know if there's any specific questions or anything as far as this discussion.
Well, I can say that I attended that announcement with the governor and executive director Braceras. I'm certainly supportive of this, especially since we have the opportunity to leverage active transportation funding that can augment our allocations on other outdoor recreation things. It's certainly an opportunity to enhance our transportation network and provide non-motorized, active transportation solutions, but there's also a recreation component to it, which is fantastic. So I'm excited, and I think I've said a couple times that I have some ideas on a few projects that I'd like to recommend for that as well. But looks like we've got someone's hand up. I'm trying to figure out who's got their hand up. I can't see. Is it Tom? Okay. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, that's me. Thanks a lot. The one thing that I would call out is that seems like a wonderful program, but it does at times overlap with the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant, which I don't know if that's a bad thing, but I know the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant has funded lots of active transportation projects over the years. And if they're getting that much money, we might try to focus more of the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant funds toward other trails or other projects that are not active transportation.
I think that's a great point. I think that's, if there's money available and being focused on those projects from active transportation accounts and funding sources, then hopefully we can free up other recreation funding sources to focus on other types of recreation assets. So I think that's a great idea.
And I'll just mention too that we've got some great planning expertise to offer too if it's needed as far as trails, the engineering, also just consulting on match opportunities for other grants and leveraging some of those funds to go even further.
Great, thanks. Any other comments on this item? Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. I think, in a way, you're preaching to the choir. We're all super excited about that, very supportive of that initiative from the governor, and I'll certainly put in a good word that I can with my legislative colleagues to the extent I'm not on the EAC or anything like that, but I am on the Appropriations Subcommittee for Transportation, the IGG Appropriations Committee. So I will take every opportunity I can to weigh in there on this and be an advocate for this to be prioritized as well. Okay, and I think the last item on our agenda is turn it over to Dr. Smith to talk about the strategic planning presentation. So, time is yours.
Great, thanks, Representative Stenquist. It is really great to hear the workshops that we convened are starting to kind of materialize some good ideas. To get started, I'll just say Merry Christmas to the Commission. I got everybody a Christmas present today. Best thing a professor could give everyone is not to have to sit through a boring PowerPoint presentation from me. So no PowerPoint presentation today. Carly did send around a document that we have been working on with the mindset that we are now leading towards the upcoming legislative session. We wanted to provide as much detail as we could on our funding analysis that we have been working on over the past several months, and I gave everyone a preview of at our meeting in November. So if you didn't have that, we do have I think copies on the table that have been shared. And if you're in the room, I do have a couple more copies if you want to see one of those as well. And Patrick and Caroline, maybe for those who are online that don't have one, if you want to pull it up and scroll through portions of it as I kind of highlight some of the important points, that would probably be helpful. So again, what we have done here, and this was completed by Casey Trout, who's a master's student up at Utah State. Casey's here today, and myself, kind of really trying to provide a broad overview of all of the ways that outdoor recreation is funded within Utah. So we set out to really map out all of the individual programs and funding mechanisms that exist within the state, where either a state entity is collecting fees, generating sales to support outdoor recreation specifically, or there's a direct appropriation coming from, for example, sales tax, in the example of the outdoor adventure infrastructure account, or a portion of taxes, sales tax as well, that's going to the outdoor recreation grant program itself. So what we've done is look broadly across all programs and funding mechanisms that exist within the state, really trying to focus on primarily those that are managed by the Division of Outdoor Recreation, the Division of State Parks, and the Office of Tourism, and thinking that there really is, again, very difficult opportunities or difficult process to separate outdoor recreation and tourism funding, particularly when we talk about the funding that's coming off of transient room tax and how that's getting used. So what we've done is take all of the funding programs and funding mechanisms that do exist within the state and compile them into one list and try to put them into one of 4 big buckets, depending upon what the state code says is allowable for those funds to actually be used for. And those 4 big buckets are either establishing and promoting tourism. That's the kind of the guiding legislative language that guides all of the monies that come off and support promotion and development, marketing efforts for tourism generally. Infrastructure development, so that's specifically talking about programs where there's monies coming off or being generated for the development of new infrastructure. Maintenance, which you broke out as being distinct, and that's monies that are being generated specifically for the maintenance of infrastructure that's already been established. And then our last category is research and education. That includes funding that supports higher education programs, as well as funding for education specifically. There's a couple of different programs that exist. Jason already talked about a couple that exist that funds are being pulled off of to support education. The off-hire vehicle program, boating program, those are permissible there. But education is one that we did break out and try to identify those programs where education was a specific allowable expense. In the meeting last month, I had shared our initial version of this funding map. And what we've done is reached out to the program managers for all of these programs and make sure that we have the right data, the right funding amounts that are going in. And we've pulled the most recent fiscal year data that's available for some. That's for this upcoming fiscal year or the fiscal year that we're currently in. But it's all within 1 or 2 years. So essentially, you can kind of interpret this map as the playing field of where state funds are going to support outdoor recreation and tourism. And again, the size of the boxes represents the amount of money that's either being allocated by the state legislature or that's being generated by a fee system or by a tax that's being used to support that program. And the colors, again, represent those 4 big categories. One of the things that we really wanted to highlight in this is that there are a lot of these programs, well, 4 specifically, that really have quite a bit of flexibility in how funding is used. And you'll see the biggest programs, or the ones that generate the most funding, are what we categorized as these flexible funding programs. And that's primarily the tourism, recreation, cultural, and convention and airport tax, the TRCC tax. And that is kind of the biggest box that you see up there in the top left-hand side of the first figure. And that's monies that is generated primarily from restaurant, a portion of restaurant sales, prepared food. And that money is collected by the county and goes directly to the county to support a variety of things, the things that are permissible. We have listed in the report, but do include everything from tourism promotion to developing, operating, and maintaining airport facilities, convention facilities, cultural facilities, recreation facilities, and tourism facilities. So these monies are most likely being used by counties to build swimming pools and convention centers and anything that's actually a county-owned facility. But it is a lot of money that's going into these programs. And again, really what we want to emphasize there is that there's flexibility in how these TRCC funds are being used by the counties. And that's worthy to note because there's often a lot of discussions over how TRCC dollars and TRT dollars can be used and how they should be used. But if you look into the state code, there are actually fairly flexible in how the counties can actually spend those monies. The next biggest bucket, the next largest bucket that we have is the TRT dollars. And these monies are split, TRT dollars for the counties specifically. There are multiple TRTs. There's state TRT, which supports, for example, Tara's UORG grant program. There's municipal TRT dollars, which go to this municipal general fund, and they can get used in any way that the municipalities want. There's the county TRT dollars, which we've outlined here because they do have some specific allowable uses. The county TRT dollars, again, that's generated primarily by hotel sales, are split and in state code can be used either for tourism-related projects. These are very general in the types of projects that they can be used for. They can be for the establishment of new facilities, for maintenance of existing facilities, or for promotion and marketing efforts. So very flexible, again, in the portion that's being carved off of county TRT dollars that goes into these tourism-related project funds. And then there is another portion that's similar size, nearly identical in size, that is dedicated specifically to establishing and promoting tourism. And these are the monies that primarily go to the destination marketing organizations to promote and develop tourism. We ran these numbers, and we do thank Vicki and her team for making sure that we had the right numbers and the right proportions for the TRT and the TRCC dollars, given that most of those funds really are coordinated across the counties from either the Utah Tourism Industry Association or by the Utah Tourism Development Board, which works to coordinate efforts across counties to the extent that that's possible. A couple of things that I do want to mention and highlight here is you can kind of see the breakdown in the TRCC dollars and the TRT dollars on table 2, is that most of this money is being generated by counties that are where people live. The more metropolitan areas, the more populous counties are where these dollars are being generated. And if you look down kind of in the list, we have them all ranked. We have pulled out the TRCC dollars that have been generated for FY22 and the TRT dollars, and then broken that out by this flexible spending monies, and then what's dedicated to establishing and promoting tourism. And kind of what you see is this rapid decline. You have metropolitan areas that are generating a lot of monies from restaurant tax and from the transient room tax, and then you have kind of a gradual right skew onto that distribution towards the less populous counties, which are generating a lot less TRT and TRCC dollars. The point I wanted to make here is that a lot of the outdoor recreation activity that's happening within the state is obviously not in the most populous areas. You look in all the recreation activity that's happening along the Wasatch Front, it's primarily on the Untitled Chapter National Forest. It's not on county lands in these areas within the major metropolitan areas. So one of the themes here that I just wanted to point out is this relatively spatial inequality between where funds are generated from TRCC and TRTT dollars and where outdoor recreation and tourism is generally happening within the state. And this leads to a lot of the problems that you see within our gateway communities, that they're generally underfunded, don't have enough resources to manage the amount of visitation that they have. And this is kind of one of the mechanisms that leads to that feedback loop, which is causing some of those problems for those smaller communities. So I pointed out one specific recommendation that we had for TRCC and TRT dollars is that there is a ability for counties to set aside 50% of their TRT funds that they're not used, they're chosen to not be used in a specific year. They can set those aside to the subsequent year's budget. And this becomes very, very helpful for particularly the more rural or less populous counties. So, Jonathan, I'm going to pick on your county here. We've highlighted Rich out as the county of example here. If you look down the list here, the amount of TRT dollars that are generated by Rich in 2022, I'm looking at table 2 here for Rich County, $932,000. Split that according to how the state code allows the county to actually allocate for different specific projects or for marketing and promoting tourism. And what you get is about $307,000 that in FY22, Rich County could actually allocate to spending in a flexible way on tourism and outdoor recreation within their county. So that doesn't actually go a long ways when it comes to actually making investments, when you think of all the ways that the county would actually want to spend those monies on, by either building new infrastructure, maintaining the existing infrastructure that they have, hiring and employing county employees. So these monies don't actually go a long ways. So the recommendation that we have here is that would be particularly beneficial for these rural or less populous counties is to think about ways that we can increase that proportion of the TRT dollars that can be rolled over into subsequent years. So our less populous counties can have an opportunity to spend more monies on larger projects if they want to do. So they can allocate specific portions of their budget. If Rich County said we wanted to have a multi-use trail and we want to set aside $50,000 every year, and 10 years down the line we're going to fund that project, they can do that if they want to appropriate it. But if the state comes along with a UDOT proposal where they're going to all of a sudden fund one of those projects, it would be beneficial for the county to be able to roll over a larger portion of their TRT dollars to actually spend on one-time investment projects and to have a little bit more of that flexibility. So that's the first recommendation. Yeah, Representative Stenquist.
Well, yeah, it just occurred to me, like, oftentimes if in government we anticipate like some source of revenue like that, like maybe it's $50,000 a year, they could roll over that fund balance, or they could perhaps bond for it and then use that revenue, that future revenue, to pay off the bond. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on bond markets, if that's, how they would view that as a stable enough source of revenue to do that. But I think that might be another option that some might look at if they've got a large project that they want to fund. But just thought.
Well, it might be particularly useful given the consistent and notable growth in TRCC and TRT dollars and the amount of monies that they've been able to generate for counties. So we have looked back historically on all the monies that have been generated through these two funds, and you'll see that in Figure 2 and Figure 3. We've plotted out the TRCC and TRT dollars that had been generated by individual counties from 2012 to 2022. You can see the steady growth. All these numbers are adjusted for inflation, so even after we consider, the growth in the general economy, the monies that are being generated by outdoor recreation and tourism are increasing fairly consistently. A couple points to highlight there in Figure 2, you will see like the notable dip in COVID, particularly in the urban areas, Salt Lake County, Summit County, and our park-associated counties with Garfield and San Juan County having notable dips there in 2020. Some of the others, Washington seemed like it was pretty impervious to any impact of COVID on TRCC and TRT dollars. They've continued to incline pretty consistently. And the general same trend on the TRT figure, which is in Figure 3. So steady growth over time. So these funds are consistent and really can be used, again, in a very flexible way by the county. So it's one of the biggest recommendations we would want to imply, particularly to the counties, is that if you look at the general funding map, it appears very clear that the biggest portions of this budget, of the state allocations or state-generated revenues that can be spent on outdoor recreation and tourism, are controlled by the counties. So the extent to which they can coordinate efforts would be beneficial, and the extent to which they can focus and leverage that funding mechanism in the way that they would want to, by deferring more of their funding for one-time projects would be particularly useful.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, please, Jonathan.
I'd like to just make a comment. So the legislature's actually been pretty good to smaller counties. Rich County is the third smallest, but we're number 14. We're right in the middle of the pack. And we did increase our tax from that 3% to the 4.25, even though it's not listed on here. And so this year we actually had about $774,000 that we could spend on mitigation or whatever we needed to, and $125,000 of that into our sheriff's department, because we do take the population of Bountiful, and it comes up on the weekend. 80% of our homes are second homes. The only county that has more second homes as a percentage is Daggett, but they only have 1,000 citizens. We have enough homes for almost every man, kid, and child to have two of them. I think the legislature's been pretty good as far as when it comes to smaller counties, and we do have that option to bond out a portion of it, and it is seen as pretty favorable. We want to reserve something like that for a much bigger project like a convention center or things like that. But I do appreciate the recommendation allowing us to roll over higher than 50%. We are starting to see, and I don't know if anybody else is starting to notice this, but we are starting to see a dip in visitors and a decline in bookings and things like that. Rich County is a little bit immune to the decline in any sort of economy because we are so close to the Wasatch Front. But again, you don't want to tie some sort of long-term funding toward to an income that you don't know how it's going to react over the next few years. But legislature's been pretty good to us small counties so far.
Yeah, and I will say, particularly with regards to the TRT, the flexible spending, the counties in, I believe it's like the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth tier can use those in more flexible ways, particularly for search and rescue and expenses like that, which is, I think, what we're kind of getting at, which is definitely helpful. Beyond the TRTC and the TRTTLRs, which we again just wanted to emphasize that that those are very flexible and are really controlled by the counties. The other accounts that we have in that big, more flexible spending section of the pie were the off-highway vehicle account, Chase, and the boating account, Ty, where you guys have every single mandate possible or allowable expense possible in those funds that you can use those funds towards. So again, it opens up a lot of opportunities. It seems like the Division of Outdoor Recreation is already starting to tap into some of those opportunities with the ways that they're using those funds for education and for maintenance. Again, we just plotted out the growth in the boating and off-highway vehicle program accounts from 2015 to 2020. So apparently the pandemic did not affect individuals' motivation to buy OHVs. Chase, that's good for you. And in 2021, 2022, the numbers, as you mentioned, Jason, continue to go up. So that's really good to see. Boating, you guys are stable. You guys are rock solid, not going anywhere. So,
Jordan, if I may, with that, just in the overview of, I've submitted some changes to Patrick to place into this to diversify where the funding is coming from for the boating restricted account that comes in there, because it's minus the state gas tax, and it's also minus the Coast Guard recreational boating safety grant comes into that. So.
Thanks, Ty. And any other minor edits to this? This is obviously a working document that will be included in our final report to the commission once we get there. So, any other details would be welcome. We do outline the other programs that are specifically dedicated to establishing and promoting. And Vicki, this is really her wheelhouse when it comes to the tourism marketing performance account, the Office of Tourism's budget. And how that's allocated. No need to kind of go into a lot of detail there, aside from noting that it does exist, and we described its establishment and how it's allocated. And then also we noted these one-time funding opportunities that have been awarded to the Office of Tourism through federal grant programs, specifically the EDA program. And we do include those on the map. There are 3-year grant programs that will be around for at least the next 3 years, so we did include them as well. And then we get into the programs that are dedicated specifically to infrastructure development, notably here the Outdoor Adventure Infrastructure Restricted Account, which we detail. We do highlight in the report, no specific agency is given authority to determine how the Outdoor Adventure Infrastructure Restricted Account are to be used, presumably leaving discretion up to the state legislature. So, Representative Stanquist, that gets to your current bill request and kind of laying out those guidelines. I think that's something that can be read into as a need here. In this is a great pool, a great resource to have, but more guidance on how those monies are allocated and used would be beneficial. The federal funds that are passed through to the state and managed by the Division of Outdoor Recreation, we've included those as well, the LWCF funds here, as well as, which we mentioned later on, the RTP program, which we also include in the analysis as well. The Outdoor Adventure the Utah Outdoor Recreation Grant Program, so TARA's programs. We note those and just briefly kind of talk about the growth in that program over time and the success of that program. We highlight that in Figure 5 of all the programs that we did look at. You see the growth in the amount of money that has gone into support outdoor recreation and tourism has come from TARA's program and the Outdoor Recreation Grant Program, over $10 million this last year. So lots of success there, obviously. We include state parks fees in the restricted account that's being used there by Jeff Rasmussen and his team, noting that, their operational budget basically fluctuates with state park visitation. They see the biggest operational budget in 2020, and it's remained relatively stable since then. But we do note going on into the programs that are specifically focused on maintenance, which we classify the state park fees restricted account as, because the monies that are generated by entrance into state parks essentially fund the operation of the state park systems. And the other programs like that are the 5% that comes off of the outdoor recreation infrastructure account to fund the RRI grants, which are restoration infrastructure grants dedicated to trail maintenance, and as I mentioned, the federal pass-through dollars that come from the Federal Highway Transportation Authority for the Recreational Trails Program. Those funds are dedicated to trails, and that small proportion of the outdoor recreation infrastructure account, that 5% that comes off of the portion of the state TRT dollars that goes into the UOR grant programs, is the only funding that the state has specifically dedicated to the maintenance of outdoor recreation infrastructure. So we can generally look at this landscape of funding and how it's being used, and generally see that there is very little dedicated funding specifically focused on maintenance of outdoor recreation infrastructure. The funding mechanisms that we do have are either very limited in how they're used, specifically being focused on off-highway vehicle trails or boating areas, or trails for the RTP program, with the RRI grant program being the only one that is flexibly used. So maybe if the shared stewardship program kind of works out and has some flexibility in how those are set up, that might be a great opportunity to expand that portion of this pie, or at least make those funds more generally be able to be used for recreation outside of state parks, outside of off-highway vehicle trails, and outside of boat ramps. So that was our recommendation there, is to look for opportunities to expand the dedicated pools of money that are allowable to be used for maintenance of outdoor recreation infrastructure. The final point that we wanted to make was that was related to education, and I talked about this quite a bit at our meeting last in November, when we talked about the funds that are dedicated to research and education. There's a little bit of funding that goes towards my program at Utah State, and a small portion of the outdoor recreation infrastructure restricted account, which goes to the hospitality and tourism management education program, which is a pilot program that the state is trying out, dedicated towards training hospitality and tourism employees. But other than that, we have very few education-focused programs. There's a couple where monies can be spent on education, like the boating program and the off-highway vehicle program, but very few dollars are dedicated specifically to education of safe and responsible outdoor recreation. So again, there, if you look at that funding map, again, what we've highlighted is there's almost no dollars going towards educating outdoor recreationists and tourists within the state, unless you can broadly interpret the work that's being done by the destination marketing organizations and the tourism programs to market and advertise outdoor recreation and tourism opportunities as somehow engaged in education. And there are some of those that are going on around the state. We've talked with a lot of the DMOs about the programs that they've run, and some of them are getting into the area of education to some extent, but they're definitely not very focused and coordinated education campaigns in a very consistent and holistic way, particularly on the scale of of a large statewide program. They're very, very spotty across the state. So that last recommendation is one that we just wanted to echo because it was one of the common themes that came out from our regional workshops, is that there's just no resource, no dedicated allocations or monies going towards education of all these new visitors, the new post-pandemic visitors that are coming and recreating on public lands. So we hope this sets a good stage for these discussions. Maybe it'll, instead of some good discussion points for the Outdoor Recreation Caucus that you're convening, and at least providing some clarity on what exists within the state, how state dollars and all of our tax dollars are being used to support outdoor recreation and tourism, so we can see where these gaps are. There's notable gaps when it comes to maintenance and education, and a lot of those areas where maintenance and education could possibly be supported, but we don't really know the extent to which like individual counties or the municipalities are actually doing that. So trying to motivate those individual organizations to really understand that there is a lot of flexibility in how they can spend those, particularly the TRCC and the TRTG dollars, and that's something that they should be actively exploring. So any questions on the numbers that we've put together or thoughts that we've had?
Well, I'll just say I took a look at this and read through it really thoroughly, and I thought it was very well done. And so, yeah, if we can give some input on a few little things, I would appreciate it. But very good, and I take great confidence going into the legislative session, trying to advocate for our children's education outdoor grant, as well as our trail crews. So hitting on education and on maintenance. So this is awesome. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and we hope that it can provide that background information, particularly for legislators that are not as familiar with outdoor recreation and how state monies are being used to support outdoor recreation currently. You can point out some of those gaps. Hopefully it'll be useful in at least showing them what the landscape looks like now and making some movements on these areas where there is a need.
Great. Are there any other comments on this? I will just mention I really appreciate this breakdown. As I've been trying to get my head around all the different funding sources and where they come from and what they're dedicated to. I mean, this is a great summary that I think I'll hold on to this and refer to it often as I'm trying to understand all these different programs and funding mechanisms and where we can improve and find some synergies here. So really appreciate that, including the recommendations as well. So thank you very much for this. Okay. I think that's the last item on our agenda, except maybe discussion of our next meeting.
That is exactly what I was going to ask.
You're just going to ask about the next meeting. So my thoughts are that we basically convene after the legislative session, and at that point, after we're all exhausted and we can assess the aftermath of the session and start planning for. I know that the idea is that we would have another round of statewide workshops sometime in maybe Q2, Q3 next year. So I think that would be fantastic as we. And obviously between now and then, more work can be done on that strategic plan draft that maybe we could start taking a look at as we convene next year.
Yeah, that's a great point, Representative Stenquist. I did fail to mention we are still working on digitizing all of our little sticky dots from those massive maps. Mm-hmm. We got to figure out what we're going to do with those maps, if we're going to store them, if we're going to keep them. But that will be a specific piece of information that will come across to the commission, probably just via email. I don't know if we need to specifically meet to discuss the findings by region, but we have some of those detailed out right now. But we wanted to make sure we have the entire set so we can get back with all those stakeholders and get them excited about that next round of workshops towards the middle of spring.
Mm-hmm. So I know that, I think that many of us will have lots of opportunities to maybe have discussions and interactions during the legislative session, including if there, certainly if we have, certainly open invitations to the Recreation and Tourism Caucus once that gets a little bit more organized. But maybe no formal commission meeting until, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe the first part of April, end of March, early April, something like that. We could perhaps look at reconvening again. Any thoughts on that? Or does that sound like a decent time frame for everyone?
I think it makes a lot of sense. The only thing I was going to raise is you previewed some of the bills you're running, and there's obviously going to be a few others that maybe pop up. Do you think we might end up with requests from legislators or groups to support different pieces of legislation, and how would we do that if we haven't met?
You mean formally as a commission saying that, I don't know if.
Assuming that we don't want to totally support your bills.
Right. Well, I'll just.
Others we might want to vet.
And I can, I'll certainly be sharing that when I present these bills, that this came out of discussions that we had as part of this commission and the workshops that we had. I don't know that we have anticipated. I haven't really thought about formally supporting specific pieces of legislation, so I don't know if that's necessarily the role of the commission. I could see maybe in future, we've talked a little bit about maybe doing some recommendations on specific projects, but I think that we need to put together a little bit more of a process around that, and that's what one of my bills is going to maybe help facilitate a little bit. So I don't know that we'd be looking for specific recommendations of support on specific pieces of legislation, but that's not to say that, for example, the league or the Association of Counties or other groups certainly could say, hey, we really support this bill. I think that would absolutely be appropriate, since so many of us maybe represent other constituencies or other organizations as well. And I know that it's different if you're part of the executive branch versus some other type of entity as well, what those rules are.
The flip side might be if someone has a really bad bill that would undermine like the research work that we're doing, or we want to see completed before they move something forward. That would be the other reason to maybe vet something.
Yeah.
Maybe no one will have a really bad idea for outdoor recreation, but
We hopefully not, but I think that's something that we can all, and certainly if any of us have concerns about a particular piece of legislation or want to support something, I think we could, communicate via email, hey, this bill we've got some concerns about, let's reach out to the sponsor. We can do that individually but also share that information amongst the commissioners, even if we don't formally meet. Does that sound good? Yeah.
I'm not looking for, I will be at the same place you're going to be for those 45 days. I'm not looking for an extra meeting, just anticipating that there's interest in this area. And 104 legislators with like 500 different ways of fixing something.
Yeah. A good point.
Turn your mic.
So last year, we had the post-legislative session OAC meeting right after in March. I can't recall whether it was like that week, would be the equivalent of the 20th or something. I don't think it was like the very week after. But the reason being that we did it then was because the great breakout of spring vacations that tend to happen right in sometime in April. So if you wanted to look at one of those weeks and see if that would be
in March?
Yeah, to just tentatively just kind of hold down.
Yeah. I think that actually if meeting sometime in March, I think would be good. The legislative session actually ends on the 3rd of March. So it ends pretty early in March. So that leaves us almost an entire month if we were to wait until April. And then we're looking at spring breaks and things like that. So maybe that second or third week of March might be good. Maybe give us a couple of weeks to take a breath.
Maybe the 14th from 2 to 4, which is a Tuesday, just like today.
I think that would be great, actually.
I think as long as you can keep them, so I have council meetings Tuesday nights, but if you can keep me ending like at the 4 o'clock hour, then then I can still drive and make it to my work session in time.
That's ideal, isn't it? Okay.
From 2 to 4?
Yeah, if you go later, then I hit traffic and I have to pick which is my favorite meeting to attend.
We could certainly do it on like a Monday, if that's okay. We could do it like Monday the 13th, if it's
You want
better.
to do Monday?
I'm okay on Tuesdays as long as we keep them ending
I
at.
can set it on the, which do you prefer?
I personally like to have them a little bit later. I mean, my preference would be to, whichever day to maybe have it like a 3 o'clock meeting, but,
Okay. Anybody
Yeah,
have
then
any
I
objections to
Monday.
Monday?
yeah, but if we could do,
20th
like, if
from-
we did Monday at 3 versus Tuesday at 2, I would be
Okay.
okay with that.
Hey, this is Kelly at SUU.
Hey, Kelly?
I'll be traveling with students to do a San Juan River trip that week. So I'm probably not going to have great service that Monday since we'll be driving, and then I'll be totally off the grid from the 14th through the 17th. So the following week would work better for me, but if the week of the 13th works best for the majority of the group, that's fine.
Well, having an outdoor adventure,
Yeah, that sounds really fun.
Our senior seminar retreat. Now that SUU has commercial river permits, I can force my students to go on a river trip for class.
Yeah.
nice.
They all complain
Yeah.
a lot about it.
Yeah, wow. Rough life in SUU for students.
It did snow on us last year,
Oh,
so
that is
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
Well,
An alternative might be the 20th.
alternative 20th,
Could be
okay.
potentially.
Well, okay, do you want to do it on the so which day did you say Kelly did not work? The week of the 13th or the week of the 20th?
the week of the 13th is when I'll be unavailable. The week of the 20th should be fine. SUU also has a really silly spring break that starts in February, so it's like winter break part 2.
Okay,
Wow.
well, is there any other discussion for 20th versus 13th?
20th works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll hold it and invite y'all. Okay,
Okay.
This room's also available on those dates, Paul's saying, so.
Good for checking that. Thanks. We don't want to make too many assumptions. Okay, well, it's the last meeting of the year and the last one before the legislative session break. I just want to say thank you so much for everyone. It's been a great year. We've learned a lot of stuff. We've made some good progress. It really was kind of we were just, a year ago, we were just kind of getting sort of organized and getting going. And we made some really good progress this year. Of course, in 2023, we want to finalize the strategic plan and have that ready for the next legislative session in 24. So we've done some great work and look forward to building on that in the coming year with everyone. Happy holidays to everyone. Hopefully everybody has a nice holiday break before the session madness starts, really after the first of the year. Any other comments before I ask for a final motion? If not,
So moved.
our new member, Director Curry, has a motion to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you so much. And I will mention that I had the pleasure of having Jason's son be my intern at this last session. It was great to get to know him. He's a fine young man. So, yeah, thanks.